G'day everyone, I'm David Reedy. Welcome to Piano Finally, a podcast by an old bloke who's getting around to learning the piano. Finally. Welcome to show 42. Thank you very much for having a listen. If this is your first time hearing the podcast, I hope you enjoy the episode. If you've been here before, then thanks for coming back. Let me know if you're learning the piano or another musical instrument and how you're going with it. You can contact me at david@pianofinally.show. Once again, I'm preparing the episode on Saturday. I'm going to see Daniel Trifonov this evening at the Opera House. I'll include a report on the concert in next week's show. The end of the first school term is rapidly approaching, which means reporting and exam marking. That's well underway and will continue for the next few weeks. And the inter-school debating competition starts again on Wednesday. So my practicing on Wednesdays is going to have to go on hold for a bit. Along with Devi, I have chosen the next lot of pieces to learn. They're all grade 1 level from the AMEB Piano for Leisure series and the ABRSM Rock School book. I'll talk about them in more detail in the next episode when I've had a chance to get a little more familiar with them. This week's episode will follow a different form from usual. This week sees the podcast's first interview, and so I'm dropping the usual reviews and the essay. I'm going to try to get some more interviews that are relevant to adult learning in the coming months, and I've reached out to a few places to see what can be arranged. The normal podcast format will return next week. As I teased in the last episode, the podcast's first interview is with someone I have mentioned a number of times. It's the person who is guiding me on my piano learning journey, my piano teacher, Devi Mamak. I'll include Devi's contact details in the show notes if you'd like to catch up with her work online. And so, without further ado, here's the interview I recorded with Devi at her piano studio earlier in the week. Hi Devi, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, David. I'm actually really excited.
Well, I sort of started the podcast just before I started lessons with you, which was interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
yes.
right. How many episodes has it been? Like 40 now?
I think 41 out so far. This, I think, is number 42.
Gaining popularity. It's something I like to listen to when I'm gardening, actually.
Oh, good. Thank you for that. Yes. Some of my students like listening to it too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
It's fun. So you obviously work as a piano teacher. You're my piano teacher.
Yes.
I think we've been learning now for, well, it's over 6 months, coming up to 9 months, I think.
Yeah, I think, about 3/4 of a year. That sounds about right. Yep.
We're getting there very slowly, but that's okay.
But slow and steady wins the race. That's the idea.
So how long have you been sort of into music from a performing point of view?
From a performing...
Or when did you start to learn and learn to play an instrument?
I started when I was about 4 years old, 4 or 5. I don't remember it ever really being an option. I come from my mother's Russian. I come from a Russian background, and in that culture, it's all about the arts, and that's what you do. So my mother was my first piano teacher, and largely, taught me pretty much everything that I know academically about music.
So did you enjoy it? Was it something that you looked forward to your piano lessons, or was it one of those, I have to do my piano lessons or I'm not going to get to do other things?
Honestly, I didn't like it at all as a kid growing up. And it wasn't the music. I loved the music. Being Russian, and my mother is very old school. She was that very old school type of piano teacher. You follow the dots on the page and it's all about classical. As far as she's concerned, there is only one style of music. And it's not that I dislike classical. I still love classical. But I think I realise now that I've always been creative. And so to just learn the dots on the page in that very dry kind of way, that was what I didn't enjoy. Not saying that I don't think it's important or that I regret that I know all those things. They're wonderful things to know and learn about. I just wish there was more of that creativity at that time, in that stage of my learning, rather than something that I had to have found later on in life, which is what I've been doing for myself personally. And that then trickles on to my students as well.
So did you kept doing that all the way through school?
Yes, I had no choice. I had to keep doing it, and there was no option really. So I kept doing it all through school. So I think I finished all my grades and my very first diploma by the time I'd left high school, from memory. And I just continued. And it was a lot of work. And then for my last diploma that I did with Trinity College, I was getting up to, around about, anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day of practice to do that last exam. And it was grueling. Yes. A lot of work. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And after that, where did you take it?
After that, I actually stopped playing for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it was for that reason. I had no joy in playing. I was still teaching this whole time because I actually started teaching when I was quite young. I think I was maybe I was probably 13 or 14. And, it was around that age where a lot of kids were told to get their first job, delivering newspapers or something like that. And my mother said, well, you can have your first little tiny, very, very early beginner piano student. So that's what I did. I remember there was 2 sisters. I still talk to them to this day. And one of them actually did become a music teacher herself in high school. So I think I got up to about, and they were doing exams because I just taught how I was taught. So you learn the dots on the page, you do the exams, and that's all you do. I got up to about grade 3 with them, and I remember saying to the mother, I said, "Look, I don't think I can go any further. That's about as much as I can go." And it was the mum that said, "No, you can do it. Off you go. Just keep going." And so I did. I kept teaching them until they went all the way up to grade 8.
Okay.
And then by then they left school and went to uni and did things, and we lost touch for a little while, and still occasionally keep in touch again, found each other again on Facebook or something like that. Yeah.
It's a lifelong thing.
It's a lifelong.
Once you learn how to do it.
Yeah, it's a lifelong thing. So I did. I stopped playing for myself for around about 20 years. Maybe every once in a while I might pick up a Chopin nocturne or something and have a little play a couple of times a year. But it just didn't, I didn't know where to go with it. I knew that I wanted to be creative. I wanted to learn how to improvise and try other styles, but I didn't really know where to start. So, and then my life took me in other directions. I had kids and did other things, and then eventually I did find my way and still finding my way.
So what made you come back? What was that thing that went, I'm coming back to?
I always knew that I would. In the back of my mind, I always knew that I would. So what ended up happening, I had kids, but I also started dancing. I started with Middle Eastern dance as an adult. And I think that very strict way of learning piano and that Russian culture / communist China culture played a part in me becoming so successful as a dancer. And still to this day, I still teach workshops around the world. I still perform occasionally, although not very often. And one thing that I realised that I was really good at that people assumed was my dancing technique was my musicality. And I realised that there was a little bit of a hole in the way music theory is taught to dancers. So I started coming around to my love of music through dance, but also falling in love with other styles of music from other cultures around the world, and working with musicians that were not just classical pianists. So I started thinking more and more about music again.
And I know you're heavily into Middle Eastern style music.
I mean, well, that's because of the dance style, I suppose. And I do really, really love Indian music as well. I love funk. There's so many things I love. There is lots of different styles of music that I love. I love jazz. The other thing that happened too is my son, who's now 29, he was always heavily involved in music since a little kid. When he was little, his favourite was Bob Marley and Mozart, those two together.
Yeah.
He ended up going to university and studying drums and became very involved in first death metal, much to my horror. I even played in the band a couple of times when they needed a keyboard player. I never thought that would happen. And then jazz, which was definitely more up my alley. And then just going to a lot of his gigs and, we'd have discussions about music and theory and all kinds of things. And so there were a lot of things that started bringing me back, actually.
And so you've been teaching forever, sort of thing, since you were at school.
Yeah.
So when was there a decision to that become a profession, or is it sort of just kept rolling?
Right. Well, it just kept rolling. So like I said, I started when I was 13 and I'm now 57. So I haven't stopped at that whole time. I haven't stopped. I've taught that whole time. And, there were times where I only had a few students because either I had, that many dance classes or I had little children or whatever, but I'd never, ever totally stopped. And it was probably just before COVID, I was already thinking, okay, I think I really want to start winding down dance a little bit and start, thinking more seriously about getting more students again. And so I really wanted to change the way I approached teaching. Not saying that I still wanted to teach how to read and all those things, but I wanted to have a more creative approach. I was already starting to look into some, how to improvise and some other styles of music. I really wasn't enjoying teaching that much. It was just like, oh yeah, here's some money, I wanted to be able to enjoy it, and I wanted my students to be able to enjoy it. So I started looking at, various online courses and different, YouTube and all kinds of things on how to teach more creatively, and realised that they were all tools that I already actually had. I just hadn't thought about it in that kind of way. And the other thing that I started doing was trying to think more creatively in terms of business, which I've never been that great at. And then COVID happened, of course, so it fast-tracked everything. So I started teaching a lot of dance stuff online, and then during that time, because I had a lot more time, I really wanted to focus on how to rebrand myself in terms of how I want to approach music in a more creative and fun way, and realising that I don't necessarily want to teach someone how to be the next performer. What I would love is to have anyone, no matter whether they want to perform, whether they want to go to university, or whether they just always want to play for themselves with no one else looking. The goal would be if all of my students play music for the rest of their lives in whatever capacity they want to do that, that would be the best goal.
And you teach from small children up to adults?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, all ages, whoever wants to give it a go. And I've got so many different students that are into so many different things now, some that are still very much classical. I want to do the exams, others that just love composing, others that like to improvise, all kinds of things that people are interested in. And so I largely like to follow what the student is into with a little bit of input, of course. It's like, well, you want to achieve this, so I know you don't like this part of it, but we really should if that's your goal. So I'm not the sort of teacher that is all about, well, everyone has to do an exam, because I know not everyone is a good fit for exams. Some people absolutely. Yeah. It suits their personality, it suits their learning style. They might be very goal-orientated. But other people, it just kills their joy. And that's a shame if a student is forced to do that, and then they quit because it's not their thing.
That's why I like to make exams, like science exams, quite simple.
Yeah.
show me you can do it. I don't want you to stress about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I think, music should be, well, we often say as teachers or even to ourselves, what am I going to play today? And so we need to emphasize that play, not that, I've got to sit there and do these boring scales or...
Scales aren't boring, yes they are.
No, but a lot of people think...
yes.
I used to hate scales, and now I'm so glad I know my scales, because it just opens up a whole world of possibilities.
I like it when I remember them.
That's always a bonus.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second time through, when I've remembered the sharps that I forgot the first time through.
Yeah, it always sometimes helps to just do that little one octave run through. They go, oh, that's it.
Yes, that's it.
And then off you go.
Yes. So what's your favourite bit about teaching? What is the thing you go, this is my favourite bit?
My favourite bit is when the student, not necessarily when they get it, when they're really, really trying and they see that even though they haven't got it yet, that there's an improvement, that they're enjoying whatever it is that they're doing. I have to say I do love the ones that love to compose. And they bring me their ideas and we kind of tweak them and play with them together. I do really like the composition side of things. But really it depends on the students. So if they're getting something out of it and they're getting joy, then I'm enjoying it too.
And what's the worst bit about teaching?
The worst bit...
And you can't say Friday afternoons.
No. I like Friday afternoons. I have them off. The worst bit, I think, is when... And I just want to say that I'm definitely not all about hours of practice, because I know now through my own experience that hours and hours of practice do not work. But the thing I dislike the most is when little kids are not encouraged to do a little tiny bit of practice each week, or even adults that just can't seem to find that time in their week to practice, not because of any goal, rather it's because what happens is that they've forgotten what we've done a week before, and every single person that doesn't do that practice thinks it's because they're not good enough. It's like, oh, well, I'm just not good at piano. And it's no, it's actually you just forgot what we did the week before. And it's really hard to explain that to parents especially. Yeah, so it's also parents that, are not involved. Don't practice, we want the telly on, or, it's just something they throw money at and then wonder why their child's not interested. It's like it's something separate that's not involvement. There's no involvement from the rest of the family. Right. So that's always a bit disappointing. I'm actually thinking about, for new students, any new students that I get from here on out, actually giving them like a term where they've got to actually prove to me that they're going to do some practice, just a little bit. Like I said, for a straight up beginner, 10 minutes 2 or 3 times a week. That's not a lot. For little kids, they will retain that because it's really disheartening to see kids going, oh, I'm just not good at it. I don't know. I can't do that. So I'm thinking about putting that in a clause. It's like you have to prove to me that you're going to put in the work.
Some of the people I've listened to online have practice diaries and the kids get stamps or stickers and things.
Yeah, we've got some of that. I do have a lot of kids that have that, but it's sometimes really hard for the parents to stick with that.
Right.
Some parents are better at it and some are not, and we do it for a while and then it falls off and, so, every family dynamic's different, so, yeah. But, generally if you're having fun, I'm having fun, and vice versa too, I think,
So big plans for anything coming up? I know you've got an album coming out.
I do. I have the performance that you came to actually. That particular recording of that gig that we did was really good because sometimes the recordings just don't come out that well. So I'm actually working with an one of my son's old friends who does a lot of sound engineering. And we're just tweaking it, just making sure we take out, the little conversations you can hear. I really, really like a live album.
Yeah.
And so the album that I did during COVID, it just sounds a little too clean, a little bit too produced. And so I'm really excited about this one. There's a couple of new tracks that weren't on the original, which will be exciting. Unfortunately, if you recall, the sitar player wasn't there that night, so I'm hoping we can go back to that same venue with the same sound guy and get some of those other tunes. So we're just working on tidying up just a few, and it's really nice because we're just going to keep it warts and all, and to have that live sound that feels real. That's hard for me, being a bit of a perfectionist, but I think it's good practice. We all do mistakes. No, there's no such thing as mistakes. Could be an opportunity for something that sounds even better than the original. Who knows?
You keep telling me you got to move on from the mistake, so it doesn't sound like a mistake.
That's exactly right. Yes, but that's still really hard for me because it was just not part of my learning. It's like no rooms for mistakes ever, exactly like it is on the page. So I've still got a lot to learn. In terms of my own playing, so much to learn.
Well, they say you never finish learning to play an instrument.
No, and just, what's really interesting for me, trying to get better at improvising, being classically trained, it's not something you generally, told to do. If we were in Bach's time, that might have been different, but we're not. Is how the most exciting thing is how differently the brain works. I wasn't expecting that. I grew up thinking that people that improvised, that they didn't think at all, that literally the notes just fell out of their fingers and they didn't have to think about anything, and that the people like myself were the ones that had to think because we had to read all the dots on the page. But actually the opposite is true. Once you learn the dots on the page, then muscle memory takes over. Muscle memory, unfortunately, is never reliable. But when you're improvising, you have to constantly think. You have to be so present. Oh, what key am I in? You have to listen to the other musicians. Where are they going? What is the form? Oh, how could I use this scale? Oh, and what rhythmic pattern am I going to use? So much to think about. And the more I do it, the more I'm excited. Not so much necessarily the sounds that come out. Sometimes they're good, sometimes not so good. But I can almost feel my brain changing, and that's exciting.
And that album will be out on?
Oh, I don't know.
SoundCloud, Spotify.
Well, yes. Look, I've been really digging my heels in with Spotify. I'm not on Spotify because I'm like, they're not very, kosher. But people are trying to talk me around to doing that. I am on Bandcamp. You can buy my current album on Bandcamp or through my website.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yes, that would be great. But I'm not sure exactly when it'll be out. It might just end up being an LP. It might not be a full album. But sometime this year, probably in the next couple of months or so. Yeah. Okay. You can tell everyone when it's out, when it happens.
Yes. Yeah. So, anything you'd like to add that I haven't thought to ask you about?
I'm thinking
advice for other older piano learners, perhaps.
Yes, that's exactly what I was just thinking. Because I do teach many adults right now. During COVID, that was the most adults I ever had, and the hardest thing for adults is their own headspace. I know a lot of them say, I don't have a young brain anymore, so it takes me longer. And while sometimes that's true, especially for someone who's a lot older, it's pretty rare. The thing that I see is old thoughts, old beliefs, old, things that don't, your inner saboteur that gets in the way. That is literally the biggest issue that any adult learner has. It's like literally every single time, without fail. So if you can find a way to move through what your parents used to tell you or the troubles you had at work that got you down or whatever it is, let that go, Have fun. If you do a mistake, I'm just saying in inverted commas because we don't like that word mistake.
Yes.
Who cares? No one's going to die. You know, just whatever, keep going. The other thing to remember, and I have to remember this myself, if you do a mistake, especially if you are improvising, keep playing it. Keep playing it. Turn it into a cool rhythmic pattern instead of a pretty note.
Yes.
Or if you fall on the note just below it or just above it, it's probably going to be the note that you're after. And if you're following a score, and I think you've talked about it on the podcast before, rather than every time you do a mistake, going, oh, okay, that's it, start again. Try really, really hard to ignore it as best you can. Keep going. If you can't, try and go like a little bit forward rather than a little bit back. That would be my advice. And just go through to the end, or wherever you're up to learning. Then sure, of course, go back. Go, okay, what went wrong? See if you can try and remember some sort of way of remembering it rather than just looking at the page. It could be a silly little rhyme, or it's the F sharp. I keep forgetting it's an F sharp, not an F, or whatever it is. Make note of it. So just before you get there next time, go, oh, here comes the F sharp. Not while you're on the F sharp. By then it's too late.
Well, it's the way I play that piece of Mozart, which is the first time you play it without the F sharp, and then you go back and you play it with the F sharp.
That's right.
Because then it sounds right.
That's right. And then what happens is the muscle memory gets very used to, I do it this way first, and then straight after I do it that way.
I've been sitting there doing those first 5 notes forever, but yes.
Yeah. And the other thing too that I would suggest that I do for myself now, I used to play everything loads and loads of times over and over and over. Play them once. And what that does is it makes you focus at one time because your brain goes, okay, I've only got one shot at this.
I've been doing 2, but yes.
Yeah,
I took that idea from you, yes.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes, to do it a couple of times, but once you know it really well, one time, and that also means that once you do, you probably will do a little mistake or whatever because you are human. You'll get better at just going, no, this is my one shot. I'm going to keep on going. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right. It's nice of you to say that you do it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
And people will keep hearing about what's going on with the lessons as I do the episodes.
We'll keep going. We'll keep it plodding along, and it'll
we'll get there eventually. Well, we won't get there. We'll keep travelling.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Traveling.
It's a Greek myth. You never get to the end. You keep. Yes, that's right. Because you keep upping the bar. That's the problem.
That's right. You keep move the finish line.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much. A big thank you to Devi for taking the time to speak with me after a day of teaching. If you'd like to see and hear some of Devi's music, there's a link to her website in the show notes. You can also find her on YouTube. If you'd like to contact me, email is the best way. david@pianofinally.show is my email address, and the show's website is at www.pianofinally.show. In both cases, Piano Finally is all one word. Next week's episode will be back to the normal format. I'll go through how we chose the next 4 pieces to learn over the coming months. You might hear some of them in the progress section. And I'll look in depth at the process I go through to maximise my chances of getting a productive practice session done. And so, until the next episode, I hope your piano stays in tune and you enjoy your time at the keys. I've now got 3 of the 4 pieces in the refining stage of practice. That doesn't mean they're perfect yet, but they don't need the intensive work each session that the last, Blackout Blues, still needs. So this week I'll include those 3. The Fritz Spindler Canon, the Turk Bagatelle in F, and Andrew Cragg's Afternoon Snooze. In each case, I'll include the first take and not the best of 3 tries. All the pieces were played using the Kawai NV10 as the keyboard and Pianotech 8 running on the M4 Pro Mac Mini, emulating the Shigeru Kawai SKEX in heroic mode.